Welcome back to Faith Diaries podcast. I hope you're having a blessed day today and the Lord continues to shine his light on you. Today this episode is a little bit different. It's with a guest speaker who is very interesting. But before I start the episode, I want to add a disclaimer. I'm asking certain questions to the benefit of the viewer. This episode is for you to understand, discern and pray about. Welcome back to Faith Diaries, everyone. Today I've got a special guest. I'm joined today by Jordan Oakes, a young voice gaining online attention, known for debating the Israel and Gaza conflict, and for his platform Speech Factors. Hi, Jordan.
Hi, nice to meet you, Melissa.
Yeah, how are you?
Great. I'm good. I'm happy. I'm happy to be on here today. Happy to be on.
I'm glad. I'm interested in your position, Jordan, on the Israel and Gaza conflict. Like you, I believe in free speech. So I
hmm
just want to get into it really. There's many questions around Hamas actually penetrating the IDF's defence. As we know, Israel's known for some of the best military and defence systems. What do you believe happened on October 7th?
I believe that October 7th, it was a bad attack. It should have never happened. But I believe that Israel is using it as a way to justify what they're doing over in Gaza. I mean, it's really terrible that it had to happen in the first place. And then you look at some of the IDF claims of the stand down orders and things that the IDF, not very many people, but a few members of the IDF have claimed that they're ordered to stand down between 5:20 and 9:20 a.m. And I mean, Charlie Kirk talked about it on the PBD podcast, and he mentioned it very well, talking about how small it is, Israel that is, and how almost the entire country is IDF. And I've seen that. I've never been to Israel, but I've talked to people from Israel, and they have claimed the same thing. You can't walk very far without seeing someone with a rifle. So I find it hard to believe that it's either got to be careful with how you say this, but it's either bloated to kind of make it seem like it's a bigger problem than it was, or it was almost intentionally as bad as it was by the Israeli government to justify their attacks in Gaza.
And I know you've spoken about this many times. Who do you believe Hamas is?
So I believe Hamas is a resistance organization. I mean, it originally was Palestinian territory, and now there's arguments. It was a shared land between Jewish people and between Muslims. But in 1948, when Israel had their original occupation of that middle section, and then in 1965, borders expanded again, and they've kind of just grown. And then now you see them occupying the West Bank and Gaza, leaving very few homes for Palestinians. So you know, I mean, if people are doing that in America, if Mexico was trying to expand the borders, or Canada, or even in England, if a bordering country was trying to expand their borders and take away from your land, I mean, I feel like there'd be a similar reaction, a similar justifiable reaction.
Many sources claim that in January 2024, the Supreme Court of Israel upheld requirements on security grants, confirmed by US media organizations such as NBC and CNN. Quote, Israel had authority to approve content from Gaza, end quote, and that journalists were embedded with Israeli military. Why do you think there is so much censorship on this war?
I mean, censorship is a big part of any war. The information that gets out to the rest of the world, countries need support, especially with something like the Israel versus Gaza conflict. I mean, it's been going on since Israel became a nation, and even before that. I believe the censorship exists naturally to control the narratives and suppress the sympathy for Palestinians, and also to reduce the criticism of Israel's actions. I mean, because you look at October 7th, and I think, what was it, something like 1,500 Israeli, I might even have the number inflated, but I believe it was roughly 1,500 Israeli deaths or hostages combined. And then you look at what Israel did in Gaza, and even the stuff that we can see that isn't censored, it's pretty heartbreaking. I mean, there's not as much footage as October 7th, because that was a 1 day attack, if you want to call it, compared to this almost 2 year war, compared to this 2 year war that went on. But I believe it's just to control the narrative.
Hmm. Speaking of media algorithms, are we being rage baited as a form of control?
To put it simply, I would say, yeah. I mean, I made a pretty not in depth, but I made a pretty decent video on that a couple weeks ago, and I believe it is. There's almost a farther narrative into it, and I think that does come into play. Yeah. So to put it simply, yes.
Yeah. I saw an interesting statement by Rabbi David. I can't even pronounce his last name, so apologies. Tuitu, I think, stating, quote, "The Jewish Messiah will only appear once Europe and Christianity is totally destroyed. So I ask you, is it good news that Islam invades Europe? It is excellent news. Islam is the broom of Israel," end quote. Are we being fed this rhetoric so we can't come together? It can't be the people.
I think naturally that's a disgusting thing for anybody to say, but I'm also not big on judging an entire group of people based off one person's thoughts and ideas. I mean, I'm not too familiar with the Torah or the Jewish Talmud or anything of that nature, and I don't think anything that specific is mentioned in those religious texts. But I don't. I mean, obviously, it's a terrible thing for anybody to say, but I think we are being fed some sort of rhetoric as a way to create that hierarchy the that is so common in Israel. I mean, they have such a hierarchy, and this is in the Talmud and the Torah is like the hierarchy, excuse me, of Jews compared to non-Jews. And I think that's the big idea of it. I think that may be a little bit he may have overstepped his words, but I think
Okay.
that's comes from the general basis of the Jewish
Okay.
hierarchy.
Now, you mentioned several important things in your debate, which I watched. I just wanted to be clear on this. So, you said that Gaza proposed peace plans. You mentioned dates such as 1988, 1994, 1999, 2005, 2006, 2008, 2017, and 2021. I just want to be clear because for the viewers that don't know, who is this according to, this information?
That's public information. I mean, I don't know exactly where the primary source comes from, but that's not hidden information. You can find it just about it. You can look them up.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's not from any specific news outlet, I'd say. I love debating people. I love learning the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's so important. Um, you also said, I'm just throwing your quotes here, 83% of civilian casualty rate means for every one IDF soldier killed, you kill four civilians.
Not IDF, but Hamas. For every one Hamas, maybe I might have said IDF, but I meant for every one Hamas soldier killed, there were four civilians.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just quoting what you said, but yeah. Okay. Why do you believe Israel do not accept these peace plans?
I believe they didn't accept it because it doesn't fit their narrative. If Hamas comes up with a peace plan and they get peace, it makes Hamas look like the good guys. And then you look at like the attacks that Israel did in 1948 was a big one where Israel invaded Gaza, and actually there's some even in the West Bank without any provocation or provocation. Um, it really doesn't fit their narrative if Hamas is able to develop this peace plan. And there was another reason that they didn't accept it was because Hamas wasn't recognizing Israel as a state, which is understandable, but I don't, it's a touchy subject because Israel doesn't recognize Palestine as a state, and neither does really much of the rest of the world. So it's hard for when Israel kind of took over that Palestinian land. I could understand why it'd be hard for the Palestinians to recognize Israel as a state and vice versa. So those are, I think, the two main reasons why Israel didn't want to accept those deals.
We know that World War II started from 1939 and ended in 1945. In 1947, the UN terminated the British mandate for Palestine, mandating independent Jewish state, which gave the Jews 56% of land, and independent Arab state, which gave them 43% of the land. The plan was to balance Arab nationalism and Jewish Zionism. Um, but in 1948, there was Arab and Israeli war, followed by the civil war in Palestine. The Civil War, for those who don't know, is to separate the Israeli Declaration of Independence in May 1948, end of the British Mandate for Palestine, and the establishment of Israel. Why do you believe the UN did this?
I believe the UN's partition mainly reflected Western guilt after World War II. I mean, because I don't think any Palestinians were killed in World War II. I mean, there might be a small number, but I mean, everyone knows the 6 million Jews figure. And I think it was this guilt, and the UN felt like they owed them something. And also that land was rightfully Israel's, not all of it, not as much as they have today, but it was rightfully Israel's and a Jewish state prior. I mean, even though they were never recognized. And then that land was taken from them. So after that, I believe it kind of pushed the UN into like this guilty feeling, and they ended up giving them the land. I mean, at least that's my opinion. I'm not too versed on that, but
Okay. Speaking of a civil war, I keep hearing things on Israel and a revolt. I will now show this next clip of what the late Charlie Kirk had to say about this.
Been to Israel many times. The whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still had the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that is an IDF soldier, right? The whole country is surveilled. And so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel was on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets because Bibi Netanyahu is basically redefining the Israeli constitution. That's not an exaggeration, right? There were protests planned this week against Netanyahu, where they anticipated tens of thousands of people to take to the streets. I'm not willing to go so far that saying that Netanyahu knew or there was intelligence here, but I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand down order? Was there a stand down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes. Wow. 6 hours. They're live streaming the killing of Jews. Did somebody in the government say stand down? That is a legitimate, non-conspiracy question. The whole country is the IDF. The whole country is. Yeah. And you're trying to tell me that they're going to concerts and kibbutzes and schools, and by reports, 6 hours. Let's say it's 3 hours. I'm actually very pro-Israel, so let me be very, so I'm not exactly.
Well, I think we all are.
No, I just want to make sure my position is clear here. But so Patrick, there are other explanations. It's possible that the Netanyahu government was double-crossed by bad agents. Another aspect is that Netanyahu might have traitors in his government. Is that maybe there are some people within those intel agencies that aren't as sympathetic. Or maybe, Patrick, maybe they might have gotten a tip, they might have gotten whispers, but no one thought it would be 1,200 Jews dead. That's a potential, right? But the fact is now Bibi and the Israeli hard-right government has a mandate. I got to be careful the way I say this. They're going to try to ethnically cleanse Gaza. They're talking about basically removing 2.5 million people from there, okay? And honestly, they have a mandate to go seek justice and revenge. They do. This idea that they need to have a truce or a peace treaty, that's morally crap after you see women and children be burned alive and dragged to the streets. But there are some serious questions here, Patrick. And let me tell you, my pattern recognition over the last 5 years has become pretty sharp. COVID, Maui fires, Epstein. When I see a story and it doesn't click, our guts are usually right.
Let me pause that.
The infamous clip. The infamous clip. I love that clip. And I love that quote from him at the end. When something doesn't click, our guts are usually right. I love that quote from him at the end because it really kind of sums up a lot of what I stand for. There's proof for some of the things I stand for, but it's not really a gut feeling either, but it's kind of just, you got to really step out on a limb and go talk about what people really don't want to talk about.
Yeah, I find it very interesting that he said that. I know many find it interesting the whole thing around his death. But speaking of, both sides of what's actually happening in Israel, I've been seeing clips, especially from Jews. So let me know your thoughts on this next clip.
Israel is not the Jewish state.
This is not a Jewish state. It's a Zionist terrorist state.
It's a Zionist terrorist state.
Correct.
So why is it that they don't consider you? Look, a Jewish person is against that. Are you anti-Semitic?
Let me ask you, am I anti-Semitic?
Tell me, that's what they want to say. Anyone who's against them is anti-Semitic. You're a Jew, yet you're against them.
But the difference between Judaism and Judaism is a religion, Zionism is nationalism. This has nothing to do with anti-Semitic. Jews lived in peace with the Palestinian people hundreds of years, and we lived in peace and we can still live in peace. It's only because Zionism is the philosophy of there's a political movement.
Do you think the Jews and Palestinians are being lied to?
I do. I think it's both sides. I don't think any particular group of people is bad. I don't, and it sucks because some of my content does produce like bad apples, people who, are genuinely anti-Semitic and harbor hatred for certain people. And I really try to stress the fact that that's not how I view things at all. And I think I don't have anything against Jewish people as a whole. I respect people of all religions. I think faith and religion is one of the most important things that we have as humans. And I don't,
Amen.
whether you're Muslim, Christian, Catholic, Jewish, I don't care. I respect that. And I have a video like that of me talking about that pinned on my profile because I feel like that's the most important part of what I say. But yeah, I think both sides are being lied to, and it's a group of people high up. It's the elitists, and a majority of them are Jewish because, like I said, it dates way back in history to that hierarchy of Jews versus non-Jewish people. And I'm not saying all Jews feel that way, but there is a group of Jews, especially the Zionist Jews, that do feel that way, and they lie to the people to get what they want, and what they want is money and power, and it's what they've wanted for centuries.
Yeah. I'm going to change the topic a little bit now. It's still kind of on the same thing, but there are a lot of questions around Zionism and who the true Israelites are, especially biblically. We see multiple sources on the fact that Israel is regulating genetic testing, the law of 2000, which heavily regulates genetic testing, quote, to be conducted only in accredited laboratories with informed consent, a court order, and doctor's prescription, which is said to prioritize privacy and ethical concerns, end quote. These restrictions mean without proper authorization, it can lead to penalties which impacts, quote, religious or legal status under Jewish law, end quote. What's your take on this, and why do you believe these restrictions have been implemented?
I believe there's more to it. I believe a majority of the reason for the DNA restrictions is, again, going back to that hierarchy point. It promotes that ethnic hierarchy and allows for discrimination. We talk so much about discrimination here in the United States, white people, black people, and I think it's part of that. It's to reinforce that ethnic hierarchy and to almost promote discrimination in a way. And it really contradicts their idea of equality in a democracy. And I mean, even if you look at this is a little unrelated, but Karl Marx, who had a huge rabbinic Jewish ethnicity behind him, and you see a lot of that stuff is almost censored in a way. It's hard to find information on it, but it dates back to like the 1300s. And I think a lot of it has to do with that is they almost don't want you knowing who the true ethnically Jewish people are. There's a lot of weird points that could be made from that, but I believe there's more to it than what they say.
Yeah, I haven't had this written down, but it's interesting when I'm looking up about facts about Zionism and kind of how it started and who started it and where it comes from. I can understand why people do have questions about it. So your fellow opponent in the debate said, quote, in the Bible, Israel's mentioned as the homeland of Jews, including Gaza, Judea, and Samaria, end quote, that we must, quote, recognize Israel's Jewish homeland, end quote. But as a Christian, that's not entirely true. And I want to fact check that biblically and theologically. I'm going to put on a clip right now of my fellow friend, Father Calvin Robertson, just to see what he has to say about this.
I would like to end on is this clip of poor Ted Cruz going up against Tucker Carlson. Now, I'm a big fan of Tucker Carlson. I think he's a good man. He does good interviews. Not to say I always agree with everything he says or does, but I don't think I would want to agree with everything that anyone says or does. I believe in diversity of thought and opinion, if not the other sort of diversity. But he's taken a lot of stick for this one because a lot of people are misguided, including Ted Cruz. In this clip, Ted Cruz makes a grave, grave error. Let's watch it and figure out why.
Growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my... You pull out the phone and use the Google.
It's in Genesis. But so you're quoting a Bible phrase. You don't have context for it and you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology? I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker.
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay. Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two,
Hold on.
I'm not holding on.
Hold on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel. And
what does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But what? Hold on. Define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel, yes.
And so is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yeah, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
the
God's referring to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
And by the way, it's not run by Benjamin Netanyahu as a dictator. It's a democratic country that elected.
He's the prime minister,
right?
What?
But just like, America is the country run by Donald Trump. No, actually, the American people elected Donald Trump. The same principle
This is
there.
silly. I'm talking about the political entity of modern
This is
Israel.
absolutely
Yes,
insane.
and that is
You
that is
believe
such-
that's what God was.
This is such bad theology. So when the Bible's talking about blessing Israel, the Bible is talking about the people of Israel, right? So the people of Israel were the Israelites, right? And they were the followers of God, the Father. Now, God the Father was not happy with the way they were not following him, and so he sent his only begotten Son to show them how to follow him. So he essentially said, stop following the letter of the law and follow the Spirit, and be baptized in water and the Spirit, and have faith in Jesus Christ. And so they did. Many of them did. Those Israelites of the time became followers of the Messiah, who they'd been waiting for. His name was Jesus. And we now call them Christians because they are followers of Christ, Christians. And then Gentiles were grafted into, non-Israelites, non-Jews were grafted into to this body. And so both Jew and Gentile are now referred to as Christian. And this is the people of Israel. These are God's chosen people. And this is what we now refer to as the church. The church is God's chosen people. The church is the new Israel. The church is the spiritual Israel. The nation that was founded in 1948 after an agreement with my country, Great Britain, that pretty much ran that area that was referred to as Palestine at that time, was a Zionist project to have a place in the world that the Jews could live with their faith, just as the United Kingdom, just as Great Britain used to be a Christian nation. The Jews wanted to set up a Jewish nation, and they chose to call it Israel because of the links to the Bible. Doesn't make it the Israel of the Bible. Netanyahu's Israel is not the Israel of the Bible. The church is the Israel of the Bible, because we have to read the New Testament as well as the Old, because the New Testament fulfills the Old. And before people start screaming, "You're talking about replacing the Jews," no, I'm not talking about replacing. The Jews remained the Jews, and they became Messianic, and they followed Christ, and they became Christians, and we joined them. We are grafted in with them. But the Jews of today are the Jews that rejected the Messiah, rejected Christ, and it's a very modern religion. Actually, it's not the Jews of the Bible. The Torah is very different. And so what people are not considering is that by saying bless Israel is a commandment of the Bible, what they're saying is we have an idol here. And the people like Ted Cruz are making a worldly idol of the modern nation of Israel, forgetting to take on board the Bible holistically. It's a very poor teaching, but it comes from, and it's very common in America, more common than anywhere else in the world, but it comes from originally this apocalyptic and millennialist movement of the 17th and 18th century that eventually spawned a chap called John Nelson Darby.
I agree with him. I agree with him a lot. That's a great way to explain it. I really liked his points there.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think this is a misconception. I'm just going to read out here. This is a definition that pretty much anyone can find online. But as a Christian, I read the Bible and I study the Bible and I understand it. But it says in the Bible, quote, Israel means, quote, one who struggles with God, end quote, or, quote, God contends, end quote. The name was given to the patriarch Jacob after he wrestled with a divine being and prevailed. And it also refers to the nation descended from him. The name signifies a continuing relationship with God characterized by struggle and striving. So as a person, the name was given to Jacob. It was a name given to Jacob after he wrestled with an angel and was told, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, which is very interesting. Genesis 32:28, this event established the name's meaning and linked to Jacob's lineage. Jacob's lineage. So it's very interesting. So Israel refers to the collective descendants of Jacob.
Yes, yeah, 100%. And it's honestly disgusting because you even have clips of Benjamin Netanyahu saying that same thing. You know, bless Israel and you will be blessed, trying to appeal to the Christians, when in reality he's taking it out of context, as we just discussed. And so not only is it Ted Cruz, but it's also the current prime minister of the nation Israel that is misquoting the Bible and using it out of context to mislead Christians, to put it bluntly.
I think in my part as a Christian, I think I want to fact check that because I don't really like the way that's been portrayed, especially when the Bible is clear on what that means. So yeah, that's what I'd have to say about that.
100%.
Now I know we've had a lengthy talk about the Israel and Gaza war. But when it comes to representation, I just want to add in this extra segment to the podcast, which is the mass murder of and Christian Holocausts, which are not mentioned or covered. There is a genocide in Nigeria, up to 124 Christians killed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Over 7,000 Christians were killed, according to Intersociety, a Nigerian rights group. And since 2009, at least 52,000 Christians have died in violence. June 2025, over 22,000 Christians killed, primarily in the West, East, and Central Africa. And that's only in Africa alone. Globally, 4,476 Christians were killed for their faith in 2024, predominantly in Nigeria alone, with just as many in Syria and other areas. And there's also this ongoing conspiracy about the Christian Holocaust connection to the Bolsheviks as well, which was millions of Christian deaths.
The Bolshevik part, I mean, it is definitely conspiracy. I'd say there's not a huge amount of evidence backing it, but I mean, if you look, like I said, Karl Marx, I mean, was essentially the late leader of the Bolshevik Revolution with his Communist Manifesto book in 1848. And then not only him, but I can't even think of the other guy's name, Lenin. I can't think of his name, but he was also of Jewish descent, and he was the one that led the Bolshevik Revolution, and he himself was a Jew. And I believe the number is 60 million Christians were killed in the Bolshevik Revolution. And it's weird how, whether Jewish people did it or whether, it was Bolshevik Russians, at least for me, I never learned about it in school or anything. I mean, I remember we covered the Holocaust almost every year, but, we never hear of the Bolshevik Revolution, which, is conspired to be a Jewish plot against Christians. And I don't know, I just think it's weird that we don't hear much about that or any of the things that you mentioned in Nigeria.
Exactly.
Around there.
It's crazy that we have to go to certain platforms to find this information. I mean, that's what I was going to ask you, but you've pretty much spoken about is why do you believe we hear about wars everywhere, but the massacre of Christians and persecutions aren't mentioned? It's mind blowing. I feel like we're being singled out here. But what I'm trying to say is it disgusts me what's happening to Christians, the persecution and what's happening, with all these massacres and Holocaust, and there's no coverage on it and there's no mention of it. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you look at how, now again, I'm not blaming every Jew here, but if you look at how Christians are treated in Israel specifically, if kind of bringing it back to the Israel topic, it is common nature, especially for kids and younger adults of Jewish faith, to spit on Christians in Israel. I don't know if you've seen anything on that, but they are spit on and it almost looked at as filth. And then if you look at we have more churches in Iran than we do in Israel. And Iran is supposed to be, opposing the United States. I mean, we go to war there once every few decades. And there's just, and now Israel is a smaller nation, but it's almost like they have some sort of something against us, I guess is a way to put it.
Lastly, what should we be doing when it comes to such wars? And should we be able to form an opinion and be more critical and less divided? Or should we allow the media to form our opinion?
Are you referring to the Israel-Gaza conflict?
Using them as an example, but obviously, for everything else.
I mean, I think it's very important, especially we mentioned the topic of censorship earlier. I think it's very important that people form their own decisions. And that's one thing about me personally. I don't like to boast, but I look at both sides of the arguments and I counter them and I see what works. I see what makes sense. And I put the pieces of the puzzle together myself. I do a lot of independent research, and that's why some of my videos are more so to push in the algorithm's favor. It's just kind of shorter form, not as explanatory. But then a lot of my videos, I go into a deeper depth and I bring up actual statistics because I like to look at primary sources. And if I see a primary source saying one thing and then a secondary source saying another, I'm going to believe the primary source. And I believe it's important to get to the bottom of all of the information. I don't think that you should just go to a secondary source such as mainstream media and listen to what they have to say.
Absolutely, I agree with that. But I just want to make a note, especially to whoever's watching this episode. No matter if you're Jewish, Muslim, or atheist, God loves us greatly, equally. And we all have the opportunity to receive the Lord Jesus Christ and salvation. And I want to read just 2 verses of the Bible, Ephesians 2:8, which says, "For by grace are ye saved through faith, and not of yourselves. It is the gift of God." End quote. And then the one that us Christians love, which is John 3:16, which says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life." And that can be backed up by Matthew 10:40 if you want to look into that as well. I just wanted to finish this episode off with that because after everything that is going on, whether we're trying to look into the truth, trying to be critical, like you mentioned, trying to look at both sources, at the end of the day, God has created us. We have a purpose through God and we can find life through Jesus Christ. So no matter what, love is so important. And what I will say with this conflict and everything that's going on is divide and conquer. We are being divided. No matter what you believe in, no matter what point you have or whatever way you have to back that up with whatever statistics, we are being divided. I think that's the most important thing to take away from this as history repeats itself. So just remember to stay rooted in Christ. And if you're just learning about Christ, I would just say have a read of the Bible, have a think about it, and really understand that we should come together as people of God. Thank you for watching this episode. Thank you, Jordan, for coming on.
Anytime. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Very good conversation. I've learned a lot for certain. So, yeah, thank you.
Of course.
God bless. Thank you for listening to Faith Diaries. See you next episode.